to this video about wetsuits and the importance of A, getting the correct size wetsuit for open water swimming, and secondly, making sure that you put it on correctly so it doesn't inhibit or ruin your triathlon experience. So Mike is our volunteer today who's going to show you how to put the wetsuits on, and I'm going to talk you through one or two really important things to consider before you try putting this wetsuit on. First and foremost is the sizing of a triathlon wetsuit. There's a lot of issue around novice athletes thinking that a wetsuit is either too big or too small. Now, when Mike gets the wetsuit on today, I'll tell you a little bit about some of the ways to prove that a wetsuit is the correct size for you. Now, how you obtain the wetsuit, you generally have to go on either word of mouth from somebody else who's telling you, potentially the manufacturer's guiding size, or maybe the place that you're buying it from, and you've kind of got to go with their best say. Now, most of these people are very knowledgeable, and generally they will get it right. One of the issues that people do have is that the arms and the legs of triathlon wetsuits might be too long, which is fine because we can talk about how you can amend that later on. It's the torso, it is the core, it is the top of the legs that is the most important to get the fit. So when you're looking at the sizing of a wetsuit, small, medium, large, extra large, it generally is the body size, what you can pour into it, so the neoprene moves in the right way. And again, I'll go into that in a bit more detail in a moment. So the next thing is, once you have got the sized wetsuit, how do we get it on? Now today it's rather cold here on a January morning, so Mike isn't going to need a couple of the things that we actually need, and one of those is talcum powder. So generally speaking, our open water triathlons start sometime after April, May, when things are warming up, and sweat and neoprene don't work very well together. So it's quite difficult to get a wetsuit on when you've got beads of water on your legs. So using a little bit of talcum powder to dry out your arms and dry out your legs, it just helps you pull that wetsuit on a little bit easier.
Makes you smell like an old granny as well.
Yeah, you might smell a bit funny, but you're certainly going to find it easy to put the wetsuit on. So we're going to take you through now, step by step, on how to put the wetsuit on. Now the first thing Mike's going to do, we're going to hand over to him, he's going to be my robot now, is he's going to turn the wetsuit inside out as much as possible, so down to the legs, just so he doesn't have a lot to pull up his legs. Now you'll notice that Mike actually has socks on today as well. That is really useful, so if you're comfortable leaving your socks on, it means that the cotton of the sock and the inside of the neoprene will glide against each other, and it means that your foot will pull through quite quickly. If you don't have socks, then a carrier bag is another really easy way, by putting it on your foot and then pulling it up and then pulling the wetsuit on and pulling the bag off the bottom, and then doing the same with the other leg, and you should have it to about the knees on both sides. So we're going to watch Mike as he tries to put on this wetsuit. Now it's really important to know, so Mike's got very short fingernails. He's a man who keeps his nails very, very short and clean. Groomed. So he doesn't need, at the moment, to invest in wearing some gloves. Now, a lot of females have longer nails, some males do, some musicians have longer nails, and it's really important to think about using gloves, because the outside of a triathlon or open water specific wetsuit is very, very brittle, and it's very easy when you pull it under pressure to put your fingers through. So what Mike's done there is he's inched it up with just the sides of his thumb and the sides of his fingers, making sure that he hasn't actually put any tear marks in that. So what we want to do is we want to get it up to our waist and the gusset area before we even think about putting it anywhere else. Now Mike is starting to strip off his top because it's going to get warm. This is one thing you've got to be aware of, that you kind of want to get this thing done quickly, because the hotter you get, the harder it is to get on. So what we want Mike to do now is he wants to start at the very bottom, and he's going to bring the ankle of his wetsuit up about 2 or 3 inches off his ankle. Now we can take it back down later on, but we need as much neoprene as possible up into the gusset area to make sure that we've got enough to pull up across his torso and his chest. So as you can see, what he's doing is he's inching it up. It's not a big pull up like we would a pair of trousers. He's inching it bit by bit, and this is quite a long process. It might take some time until the neoprene is sitting right between the legs, right up there, and it's under what we call torsion. It's being stretched slightly. Now, depending on the size of the wetsuit and depending on the type of neoprene, it will give more or less. So Mike's got a Blue 70 wetsuit that is possibly Yamamoto rubber 38 up to 40, which means it's got a really good stretch. So you can see it's quite easy to move up. Now some athletes will invest in an entry-level suit, which may be a lower grade of neoprene, so it doesn't bend quite so much. So what has taken Mike a minute to get up, it might take a little bit longer for other people. So he's good at this point now. Mike, do we feel like it's right up in the gusset area? Do we feel we've pulled it up on the bum? Fantastic. Yeah. So the next thing now is to get his arms in. Now once he's got his arms in, it's going to be pulling the neoprene in all the wrong places. So again, he's going to inch it and get his hands through first, and he's going to inch it up till he can pull it over his shoulders. And this is a bit of a workout in itself. So we did talk in another video about doing a triathlon warm-up or an open water warm-up or a swim warm-up. This is actually part of it because it's quite tiring. So you are putting yourself through your paces while you're undertaking this wetsuit fit. Now another thing to realise here is Mike's got a tri-suit underneath, which obviously is going to add to the difficulty level of pulling on the wetsuit. It's going to work slightly against, it's going to feel slightly compressive. So in a moment, we've got to spend a bit of time making sure this wetsuit is in place. So he's spending a lot of time inch by inch. He's not pulling any of the neoprene up in large sections. He's pulling it a little bit at a time. Now we can see now he's got it all the way up, and if he turns around, you can see that there is a huge gap at the back. I'm going to pull the tabs out ready for later on here. We can see there's a huge gap. Now if Mike tries to pull this as it is right now, it's going to cause a massive strain across his back, which is not what we want. But we know this wetsuit fits him, and I'll tell you why in a moment. So what we need to do now before Mike actually tries to zip this up, and a lot of time he has to try and do this himself because there might not be anyone around to zip it up. You should normally be able to pull this up yourself, maybe with a little bit of help from somebody else. So what we're going to do before Mike zips it up, what we're going to do is we're going to think about this section across the chest here, alright, and we're going to try and pull it up, and we're going to try and pull it across the shoulders a little bit more, just to give a little bit more in the back here. So again, you might need some help to do this. Sometimes someone else can do this for you. You make a fist and put it against someone else's chest, and then I'm just going to take a little bit more neoprene, and we can see I've now got another couple of inches. He can do this himself with a little bit more practice, but certainly get somebody to help you with this. And we're just going to take this up and just little by little pull it up over his shoulders. And then if he needs help with this, he can do this himself. But if he needs help, what we can do is we can start at the hip. I'm going to pinch him here. We're going to try and pinch his neoprene, and I'm going to work down to his hip, and then I'm going to start pulling from his hip, and you can see straight away, all of a sudden we're getting a lot more neoprene working up into his armpits, and he's probably going to start feeling this getting more relaxed across his shoulders. Now can you feel the difference in either side now, Mike? So we've got all this neoprene over here, and as we turn around towards the back, we can see this is starting to pull together. So this side is pulling across more, and then we're going to do the same on this side. Just going to take it off the wrists. Now apart from warmth, there's not a lot of benefit of having a wetsuit and neoprene in the wrists or the low part of the body. So taking these things off the wrist and having more in the shoulders is much more important, really important. So now we've got to this point here where the shoulders are relaxed. We're going to come back down to his hip. I'm going to find a bit of neoprene, and I'm just going to pinch it up into his armpit again, like this. And that should have relaxed over the shoulder. And as we can see, this is coming together. So I'm going to do this for Mike today because it's going to be a little bit quicker, but if I just turn this and hold it and pull up, it should just go straight up. Now you'd think that was the end, but it really isn't. So what we're going to do now is we've got the wetsuit on, but it hasn't actually fitted properly. It isn't fitted properly. It's really important to realise that this wetsuit is going to react very differently in the water. It's going to feel very different in the water, and we're going to work against it in the swim. So we've now got to get it into a position where it's conducive to not working against our swim. So the very first thing I'm going to ask Mike to do is start thinking about the pressure in certain places when he's emulating the swim stroke. So I'm going to ask him one arm at a time, because this is the way we swim, to put his arm and reach up as far as he can and point his leg out and feel down the side if he can feel the wetsuit working against him. And if he can, he's going to start again from the hip and work up into his armpit. Then he's going to start from the arm and work down into his armpit, so the torsion or the stretch under here isn't impeding his swim. So we're just going to do this quickly today. Let's imagine that it was, he could feel it. So again, Mike could do this himself. I'm just going to start working from the arm here again. I'm going to nip him. There we go. So sometimes we find it, so I'm going to start pulling this back into the armpit a little bit more, so he's got a little bit more there. There we go. And then I'm going to come back down to the hip again, find a bit on the hip and just start working my way up, just pulling inch by inch. And then he's going to do the same thing again now. He's going to put his arm up. Can you feel that's relaxed into the armpit now? So we're starting to get it in the right places, and he would do the same on the other arm. Some swimmers would put both arms up at the same time, which is not natural. So do one arm at a time, so this side isn't under any sort of stress, and then doing the other side and stretching the leg out and making sure that it's not being pulled. So the other thing to do is across the chest as well, the same thing. So Mike predominantly used a breaststroke, which forces both parts of the chest to move back at the same time. So if that was his predominant swim, I'd want him to mimic that and feel the stretch across the chest. Is it feeling a little bit tight here, Mike?
Yeah,
a little bit.
Yeah.
So what we've got to do is we've got to release this off the chest. So we can start from the neck. So again, we would just get a hold of ourselves. We'd work our way down to the middle here. We'd work our way down and we start pulling up from the front. So pull up from the gusset, and we can see straight away that's relaxing. Then we'd work our way out to the shoulders, and then we'd just pull in across the shoulders. I've only done one side here, but Mike, if you push your shoulders back again, is that starting to release?
Better. Yeah,
right.
It's down there.
And again, Mike would do the same on the other side. So there's two really important aspects to think about getting the wetsuit in place. So if we turn it around, we've pulled the zip up. This can be under torsion, it can be tight. His shoulders are going to be further back anyway, so that will release. The water also allows the neoprene to release, so you probably won't feel quite as constricted in the water. We call it giving, so it gives in the water. But we now know that his wetsuit isn't going to work against him in the swim. So, Mike, if you want to turn around. So we said earlier in the video that we needed to be sure that the wetsuit fitted us. Now I know for a fact right now that Mike isn't the most comfortable because the wetsuit isn't in its natural environment and it's supposed to be in the water, so it's probably feeling a bit tight right now. And as he walks around the quayside or on the beach waiting and he's in the hot sun, it's going to feel more and more uncomfortable because he's going to get hotter and hotter. But there's a few things that we need to check, just to double check that we've got the right size wetsuit. Okay, we want the gaskets on the wrist to be tight enough not to allow water in, but we certainly don't want them to feel constrictive. And we would know that the hand would start to change colour, the veins in the hand would come up, we'd know it was too constricted. Around the neck, again, we need the gasket to form a nice seal. But the beauty of wetsuits is we can release that seal if it is a little bit too tight. We can just release it on the neck with this Velcro clasp. So we would double check that that's fitting correctly. Same in the bottom of the leg. Obviously Mike's going to take his socks off at some point, but we want to make sure that the gaskets at the bottom are just tight enough and they're sat in the right place. So there's a few ways of making sure the wetsuit is correct. One thing that swimmers experience is this compression all over, and they convince themselves that it's too tight. And if you inch it into place like we said, the places that feel the most uncomfortable is normally around the chest area, constricting the breathing. If we can pull the wetsuit into place on the quayside or on the beach and it's not constrictive around there, generally know we've got the right wetsuit. It needs to be compressive through the legs, through the torso. It needs to be compressive in the arms, but with enough material for it to be a little bit more relaxed around the chest. And one of the questions is, how do we know what's compressive? How do we know what's under torsion? Well, wetsuit material needs to be under a little bit of torsion for it to work correctly. And by that, what I mean is, if we were wearing a shirt or a t-shirt sat against our skin, we know that it is not under any sort of stress. It's just sat there, lank, loose. You could put a wetsuit on that would be very similar. It would be under no stretch. It would sit against your body loose. Well, we can't have that, because if that's the case, when we go in the water and the neoprene just relaxes, it will fill up with water. It will fill up with water and you'll end up with an experience where you feel like you're being dragged down, because what happens is it pulls in the armpits, it pulls in the gusset area, it pulls around the chest, inhibits your swim, makes you feel heavy, and it ruins your experience. So by having this neoprene that is just under a gentle stretch all over the body, we know it's doing the right thing. And it's always going to feel slightly tight before you get in the water. It will relax into the water. So Mike, is there anything about your experience in a wetsuit that you'd want to divulge to our athletes and things that we've missed?
No, other than I don't think this wetsuit has ever been put on properly in the 2 years that I've had it. So that those extra hitches, particularly from the hip up, really feel like I've got some extra freedom in the arms.
Yeah.
That's been really good.
Yes, well, a couple of little tips for when you've got your wetsuits on. So sort of working backwards here, if Mike just turns around. So you know you've got a release cord here. So this is allowing you to rip down and get yourself out. And you should practice that before you're in the water, because knowing where this is going to be is really important. Some people allow it to hang down and they just put the hand behind the back like that and they pull. So that works straight away. Others, they attach it to the top and they grab from the top and they pull their arm round and release that way. So it's really important to know where that is. And the only other thing that I would say about the wetsuits is we talked about using talc as a way of ensuring that the moisture on your skin didn't cause an issue, but there is other irritations as well under the wetsuit we've got to consider. And this is things like areas of like armpits around here or around the neckline can actually chafe a little bit. So it's really important to think about some sort of lubrication just to protect yourself. And the main one that I've seen is on the back of the neck. Sometimes the Velcro on the back of the neck rubs against the neck, so you've got to be really careful that you've placed the Velcro on Velcro and not on skin. And that you've got to make sure that you get a really good system of using things like Body Glide, which is like a non-paraffin based anti-chafe cream, and you would put that liberally all around the neck, especially on the back end of the Velcro, and then potentially in areas like the armpits where the neoprene might gather and rub. Really important that you use this sort of thing. You can use Vaseline. It's not recommended by wetsuit manufacturers because the petroleum-based gel can actually work against some of the glue, and over a long period of time it can actually diminish the integrity of your wetsuit. But if you wash your wetsuit regularly, Vaseline is absolutely spot on. It's very useful, especially if you've got something like a tri-suit underneath like Mike's got today. That extra layer can just create a little bit more friction, so it's really useful to use your Body Glide and your Vaseline. And as far as Vaseline's concerned, it can be one of our best friends in the getting off of wetsuits, because when you get out of the water, pulling your arms out of the wetsuit with tight gaskets can sometimes be an issue, so it can get caught on your wrists. And then trying to get off your feet when you're tired, it can also get caught on your feet, especially when you put neoprene against neoprene and it binds tight. It's very difficult to get off. So what we would advise to do with a carrier bag over your hand is to put a liberal amount of Vaseline around the gasket on the outside, and then flip the gasket over and put a little bit around your wrist, and then you would do exactly the same with your feet. You'd put a little bit around the outside, flip the gasket over, put a bit on your ankle and down your feet, and that will help you slide the wetsuit off without any bother. Now I think that pretty much covers everything about the wetsuit. The reality is it's quite arduous. It is quite a tough job to get on, and even some of the pros find it difficult to get off. So it's not something you can leave till race day. It is certainly something you should practice in a cooler environment, I would say. Today is probably a good day.
It's ideal.
So, yeah, you're probably not that warm at the moment. So we hope that helps you. I hope that helps you with having a good wetsuit experience.